Jon Sargent with the Alarm Museum.
Hi, I'm Ralph W. Sevinor from the Alarm Museum, and I am delighted to introduce a friend of ours, Don Sperber, who's been in the industry for well over 60 years, I think, right?
Yes, sir.
And so I'd like to open it up with, how'd you get into the alarm industry? But before that, I do want to thank you for your time. I know you've spent a lot of time in the military and the Marines, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. When I was out of the Marine Corps, I went to an employment agency, and they sent me down to homes protection. And I said I worked with heavy wires and I did all this stuff, and they didn't hire me. I went to another employment agency, and they said they're going to send me to the homes company. I says, just there last week. He says, don't worry about it. All you got to say, you work with little teeny weeny wires and they're going to hire you. So I went down, I repeated what I was told, and I got the job. And with my military background, they put me with an installer that was there 43 years. And I was his helper. And from there, I learned a good trade. And we worked from 8 o'clock till 4:30. If I started to wash my hands 25 after 4, the guy would shoot me. So I knew how the game was played. You get paid from 8 o'clock till 4:30, you better be working at 8:01. And that's what I learned. I learned the hard school of knocks.
Interesting. So you, Holmes Company, and you were working, I think at the time, probably with direct wires and McCullough circuits, and they ran their own wires.
The direct wires, they were either leasing them from the phone company, but prior to that, with the mechanic that I worked with, he would tell me stories how they would cast the lines over the rooftops from building to building to avoid paying the phone company. And in Manhattan, when you looked up, it was almost black. There were so many lines until they finally outlawed that.
About what year was that?
I started in 1960, and I worked for them for 2 years.
Right, so they got rid of those lines.
Oh no, they got rid of them probably, I'm guessing, around the time of the Depression, because it was really crazy to look up and see all those wiring.
So then where'd you go from there?
I met a guy that worked for AT&T. He was an engineer, and he was doing alarms, and somebody told him I knew how to foil. And I said I would do the foiling for me, and he paid me like $25, and I did the job. I said, what do you charge for the job? He says, I get $25. I said, how do you make money? He said, well, I got to put in a control box. There was no central station. And I charged $6 a month. I said, $6 a month? What do you get for that? He said, they break his window, the bell rings. I says, boy, I like that. I think I should try that. So I said, could you teach me how it works and give me copies of your contract? And he gave me everything, so it was nice. That's basically how I got started. And when I started to do the work, I would do the houses, and I would charge an installation, get a service contract. A lot of times I would lease it. But when the tape dialers came out, I jumped at it because I knew Holmes was getting over $1,000 a month for a jewelry store, and their prices were super high. So I started off at $40 a month with a tape dialer, and I leased it. And that's basically how I got rolling in that business.
What was the name of the company at the time?
It was also All-Time Detection.
So they've been around for many years.
I've kept the name.
So you founded it? Excellent. And then when did you get into the monitoring center?
When AMCEST opened up, he had worked for Demco, and he started out. And I used him, and you paid $5 a month. And what was terrible is the other companies were getting $15, $20 a month. It almost ruined me because I was getting for a tape dialer $40, and I didn't want to switch over. But after a couple of years of not being smart enough to switch over, I would lose some jobs because people would tell me there was going to be a live operator to take the call and send the police. So then I caught on. I'd have to change, and I still try to get the $40 a month.
And you did?
I did on most cases.
It's the first time I ever heard someone that leased a tape telephone dialer and made a recurring revenue on it. That's an interesting model.
The Holmes Company and ADT were always leased. You didn't buy a thing from them. So I just thought that was the only way to do it.
Right. What product did you use?
I, believe it or not, became good friends with Coleman and Verga right after they sold the Demco for $4 million to Leo Goodhart. And he wrote a thesis in college, Why Small Businesses Can't Expand and Grow. And it was basically the same theory that Warren Buffett had. You take a small company, whether it's family or whatever, give them unlimited money, inventory, advertising, they're going to become a great success. So Leo Goodhart was friends with King Harris, and he became the leader of the band. And I was very good friends with him, and he helped me out a lot. So I was very fortunate.
Yeah, he's a great individual.
Oh yeah.
Of the industry.
Yeah.
And so you were using a Demco at the time, I think Carl Park or something like that, or Syosset.
Yeah.
And then when did you decide that it was time to move out of third party and then open up your own?
That probably happened in 1981. I knew I had to buy a phone building for the UL listing and to be set up the right way. And I found the building, and I had a partner that had worked for me, and we decided we'd start a central station. And he had a good friend named Bart Ditton who wanted to go in with me. And I said, how much money do you have? He says, I have a bread route. I said, what's it worth? He said, I could sell it for $25,000. I said, do it, and you're my partner. He put up $25,000. I put up the rest, and we opened our first central station. And now we have 4. And we're doing it as a partnership for 40 years. It's over 40 years now. So everybody was happy.
What did you enjoy doing most? Did you enjoy running the company, looking at the technology, selling?
I started out like everybody else. You work out of the trunk of your car. You don't really know anything about sales, marketing, or what day it is. So as time went on, I was able to double my business every year for 4 or 5 years. And then I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have salespeople, then I had to get salespeople. And I didn't understand the marketing strategy of how you had to have people installing, you had to have people selling. No one guy could do it all. And that became a big obstacle to me. So one of my favorite stories is I hear about Norm Eisenstadt, who did work with a Demco for a while.
He was a big smoker, if I recall.
Yeah, smoker, and he was the sales guru of the alarm industry. So he took a job out in Pittsburgh with Westinghouse, and they were using a flash cube on a window. When you open the window, it pulled this toilet bowl plunger out, and it flashed the cube. The light hit the discriminator that would ring a bicycle horn. So I said, what do you get for that? He said, we get $600. There was no central station or anything like that.
Wow.
So I said, well, how many do you sell? He says, well, we get 20 leads. We divide them up amongst the sales guys. We send them out. And if we get a 25% closing, we're going to close 5 jobs out of the 20 at $600 a piece. We take in $3,000. I said, it's unbelievable. So I says, wait till you hear my story, Norman. And I said, I went out and I sold 35 jobs in a row. And then he put his head down on the desk. And I said, then I missed one. I went out and sold another 25 jobs in a row. And I said, what do you think of that? He says, when I pick up my head and talk to you, you won't sleep in your bed for 30 days. You won't sleep maybe for longer than that. So I said to myself, what could he possibly say to me? Sure enough, he picked up his head. He leaned over the table. We were nose to nose. And he said, schmuck, your prices are too low. I had to get back on the plane and fly home. And I must have been sick for a year. I never, ever got over that. And then, to make things even worse, I was very good friends with Norman Rubin. So when Norman Rubin fought the phone company and won in court, and he had the right to dig up the streets, and then eventually he sold his business for $28,500,000, and the check arrived on a Friday at 4 o'clock. He immediately sent a letter over to England that the check came late, and the interest due was $12,500, and he received that on the next week. And people used to ask Norman, how could you get that much money for your company? And he says, you can ask whatever you want. If somebody pays it, that's what it's worth. If they don't pay it, it's not worth that kind of money. So I became very good friends with Norman. There were many other stories, but you'll need about 12 hours to interview me if we go through all the stories.
This is great. This is great.
It's very interesting.
So I'll tell you one other story because it's not as bad as it was. So in 1969, I was buying a house, and the house was $68,500, and the biggest mortgage you could get in those days was $30,000.
That was a lot of money back then for us.
So I was always in with the police department, with all the government agencies. They recommended me, the questionable people, I don't want to mention who they are, but I did work for everyone. So when I went out to a Demco the first time, they had just come out with their modulum, the 130 and the 131. And I said, could I put 20 on one end and build 20 on? No, we can't figure out how to do it. I can't do it. I says, I'll take it, but I want 4 extras. So I hook up the 30 that I need on both sides, and one always doesn't work. So I said, you know what? I'll make it 31 and 31. I just won't use the last one, and it worked. When I told them how simple it was, they were dumbfounded. And I became good friends with Coleman. I used to talk to him technical, because after the Second World War, he brought up freight cars of the Sigma relay that only drew about 3 milliamps. So you probably know what 3 milliamps is compared to, you're too young to know. No, I'm sure you know also. So I would buy from them, and because I came out with all these big brass from the police department and the other group of people, I became the vendor of choice, and they recommended me all their vendors, whether it was Fox that made the boxes, the guy that did the circuit boards. So I started off, I had high-end clientele, and even from King Harris, guy Alan Newmark that was in with the grandfather for Motorola. They'd always give him all the sites for free and put it up. So it was interesting. I always met good people from the beginning.
Why do you think, where you were on the island, Long Island?
I wasn't on the island, I was up in Westchester.
Westchester.
Like Greenwich, Connecticut, Conyers Farm, all high-end people.
So why do you think on Long Island, or that area, Connecticut, there were so many manufacturers? There was Conrack, and there was NAPCO, and there was Ademco, FBI, and
Tommy Orlando, API, probably way before your time.
API. I remember. Yeah, Long Island City, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's a sad story. I met him one time. I was out near the Triborough Bridge. I met him in a dining. We were sitting there talking, and I said, "How you doing? You must be doing great with everything." He says, "Don, doing what I did was the biggest mistake of my life. I should have stayed small. This has eaten me up alive. I just can't function. I got so many problems." And he had trouble with Ademco. They wouldn't sell him bells. Then they made him buy all the bells. Then they couldn't get the 8-inch bells. He wouldn't sell it to them. He had 10,000 bells they made him buy. And then finally he sold them, and he made a lot of money on it. And 6 months after that, he had a heart attack and died. So I was heartbroken over that.
Why do you think there were so many companies in that area, manufacturers?
It just worked out that there was more activity there. I mean, when you get the Dodge reports back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I don't care what it is, and you take Manhattan, it'll be 1 inch high, take Westchester 1/2 inch, you take the island, maybe 5-6 inches, you go out to Jersey, it could be a shoebox full. So it was amazing because of the space. When you look at big builders, and you mention the big names, I'm not going to talk about California, this is somebody here that knows more than me, so we can't talk about that. But I'll talk about the builders that were up in the New York area that were building houses. And in 1968, when the Vietnam War broke out, they were Pickwick. The plywood went from $2 a sheet to $12 a sheet. And they folded their tent. They went to Florida. They asked me to go along with them, but for whatever reason, I didn't go. They became WCI, who was one of the biggest builders in the country. It was unbelievable, the amount of work. And they tapped out about 3 years ago. But in Westchester, let's say they're going to build 1,000 houses a year. In Connecticut, maybe they're going to build 3,000 houses a year. You go out in Long Island or California, for them to put up a circle and put in 5, 10, 15,000 houses, it was nothing. So there was enough work for everyone.
On a side note, what are the steps you would think to make a successful alarm company today?
Only one thing, you have to give good service. You don't give good service, you don't get the recommendations, you don't keep your customers.
So keep the customers happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My guys know when they're doing an installation, the customer don't like the way the motion's working, they say, look, it's the company policy. If you want me to put another motion over here, I'll do it for you. It's absolutely no charge. I don't have to call the office. Then the customer isn't defensive and looking to buy a machine gun to put a bullet hole in me. So the guy does it, gives me a good reputation with the customer, and usually they get a nice tip out of it, and I'm not worried about the motion detector.
And that's great that you give them the authority to make those decisions at that level.
But in some cases, I come back in the middle of the night and I steal it. No, I'm only kidding.
What else would you suggest? So obviously, customers king.
Absolutely.
But the industry as a whole has gotten more complex. Regulatory, technology, everything else.
Well, we pushed for the license. We got pictures of Jerry Geller, who started the Alarm Association. We picketed City Hall, and we went up to Albany and all of that. And we feel we were instrumental in getting a license passed. And it turned out to be a good thing. And some of the problems that I faced when I was president of the Alarm Association out on the island is the police department didn't want to respond to the calls. So the first time, ADT would have 4,000 calls on a bank, and they did nothing about it because they said, hey, who's going to bother us? So the police department said to ADT, we're not going to respond anymore. And ADT was smart enough to say to the chief, the first time you don't respond, no banks are opening up on the island. Now you tell me what you want to do. And the chief backed down. Now, when I was the president and we met with the police department, I told all the members in the association, you can't ask any bad questions to the manufacturers, to the police department, whatever it is. You tell me and I'll get the answer for you. And if it should be brought out in the open, then I'll take care of it. But what I did, I said to the police, you know, it's a great idea that you should not respond to any alarm systems because 98% of the time we know it's a false alarm. I said, there's a better answer. I said, we could start private guard service. You could save the town a ton of money by eliminating half the police force because you tell me how much time it takes to do this. And when I got finished with them, they were so happy to respond to alarms and not worry about false alarms. So that's where I came from. I always listened, and I tried to get on the side of the police department as to what their complaint was, and I felt I had to give them a remedy that would eliminate the problem totally. The fact that they would have to lay off half the cops because they had nothing to do, there were no more false alarms, they sort of backed away from that. And that was always...
interesting perspective.
I always took the other side. And I said, you know, if I was you, I wouldn't ask for a $50 discount. I'd ask for $150 and then split it. At least you get $75. The other way you were going to settle for $50. No.
Have you entered into other technologies like managed access and video and other services?
Whatever came along, whether it was the card access where we cut the hole, we put the wires down, the manufacturer tells you 8 times, then you start to have trouble, the service calls, you call them. I put it 15 times. It doesn't matter, it's just going to pick up the proximity of the vehicle, it's going to trip it and let the gate go up, and the people drive out. But cameras and custom work with making a grill over the air conditioner, drilling the 3/4 hole for 4 cameras, and only putting 1 in and 3 dummies in the other. And everybody thought it was just part of the air conditioner.
Right, sure, part of the decor.
Yeah.
Interesting. What else do you see in the industry? If you were just starting out today, you're 20 years old, what would you have done differently, or what do you have focused on?
I would have financed everything for my customer. So if I was doing a $30,000 camera job, and somebody else wanted to do it for 25 or 32, I would go in at 30,000. I would finance it for them over 5 years, include service in there, and I would finance it out with a finance company. I would pay the interest, and they'd have to pay the finance company. If they defaulted, they would sue them. They would do the credit check. Because when you really get into this industry, how did it get started with free installations? So it wasn't ADT, so we got to throw them aside. So what company was it? It was Brinks, and this was in the 70s. And here's the mistakes that they made and they admitted to. They did houses that are over 5,000 square feet. They didn't have the technical ability to train the people or supervise it or run it the right way. So that fell by the wayside. The next mistake they made, they went into big cities with very poor credit checks, and they did apartments. And they put the jobs in at a loss. They were looking to get 30, 40, 50. It doesn't matter what they were getting. It just didn't work out. Now they're streamlined. The total value of Brinks today is probably 3.2 billion if you were to look on the stock charts. And ADT might be 6 or 7 billion. So it's really a very small industry in dollar volume and profit dollars. So when you look at Apollo, which owns, it bought 85% of ADT and wasn't really able to do anything with it. So you say to yourself, what's really going on? And then you look at Stanley, that was mismanaged, and they wound up selling. And they had supervisors that would operate from Albany all the way down to Brooklyn, one guy to supervise 10, 12 salespeople. You know, you can't operate that way. And I think Securitas is as big as they are, and I have good inside information on what goes on with them. They're going to run up against the same roadblock. Unless you're able to spend the money to train your people continuously to get into all the new camera technology, that they're going to have lights, they're going to have sirens, they're going to have the cloud service. This company's offering it with 7-year storage of what's going on. So a guy that's in a supermarket that may be self-insured because it's the only way they could survive, they're going to have somebody fall, and 2-3 years later the lawsuit pops up. They were crippled, they were this, that, and the other. Now with their NVR, DVR, whatever you want to call it, they might not have saved the hard drives and changed them regularly. But with a 7-year memory at a very low price, it's a bargain. So I got a lot of jobs I did with very expensive stuff. I'm going to switch over to this new thing for $3.50 a month, you know, as a central station operator.
Do you see space for that independent person today in the business? Because it's gotten more complex.
Any
right?
small guy that starts out, which are always cops or firemen or handy people, electricians, anybody, even AV guys to get into it, there's a zillion people. If you could go out and when you knock on that door very gently and they open the door and you have a good greeting and you say the right thing in the first 5 seconds, the customer, I like you, I trust you, I'll do business with you. And that gets you in. If you don't have that good service, they're taking away those 3 things they said about you before you could slam the car door on the way out. And that's the secret of success. You've got to think, what do I want to hear as a customer? And as a salesman, I better satisfy that customer and be able to say it. Not that I have to say, pick 1 out of 3. Okay, pick 1 out of 2. Okay, that's the one you like, the last one. Doesn't work that way. You got to be able to do it.
And I guess to your point, we're all selling, right? Whether it be an installer, we've got to sell to the individual to make sure.
You're selling yourself.
Right.
You're not selling pots and pans. You're not selling burglar alarms. You sell yourself. And you have to transmit that in that first 2-3 seconds.
Yep. Any over 60 years experience, it's amazing. I don't know anyone that we've interviewed with that much experience. That's pretty amazing. You've seen it all, or you've seen most of it, right?
I'm going to ask myself the next question. Don, what would you contribute your success to? I only hired people that were smarter than me. That's my secret.
That's great. And actually, that's some good words of wisdom.
Yeah.
If I'm smarter than somebody, they're out.
How do you attract people? So how do you attract those smart people that really perform?
Most people would seek me out. I was in the Alarm Association. I'd give people advice that they had to have a 401k, they had to buy a building and this, that, and the other. So when I started out with Bart, we opened up, we did well, and we continually bought real estate. And then the town took one building for us. It was 6 years. They didn't pay us a dime. We got a letter from CVS. They wanted the whole block. They'll pay us $300,000 a year, plus cost of living and everything else. So we went to the planning board and we got permission to get the building back and tear down the building and do a deal with CVS that would pay tax from day one. Walgreens had a 20-year tax exemption. The town attorney said no. Now, all through the United States, all the towns permit the town attorney to represent the developer that comes in. And the reason is, in that contract is an agreement that in the event of a lawsuit and the town loses, the developer has to pay. So we collected over $3 million. And we then sued for the legal bill, and it was $800,000. We got half of that, and I feel the attorney was in error, that we should have been entitled to sue for the other half under eminent domain, since after 6 years they didn't pay us a dime. They violated that contract, and it should have been canceled by the judge. So the judge was wrong. But I did fly up to sit in on the court case in Brooklyn on the appeals. And when they made that ruling, the attorney didn't tell me about it, but I would have not accepted the ruling. I would have sent a letter to the judge letting him know that he's in error, that 6 years was not a reasonable time to have eminent domain be in effect, that I would lose the other $400,000 to try to collect my money.
You, changing gears, you had participated in the Alarm Association in Long Island.
Yes.
For many years.
Yes.
Tell me about pros and cons, value, worth, time, investment.
Well, I went there to help people. I didn't go there because I wanted something. And for me, it was a very difficult time to go out there and have to tell these guys. And they were against distributing, they were against Central. If an alarm company did something, oh, you can't do that, you're an alarm guy. I said, look, I'm in distribution. Demco made me their first unauthorized distributor, and I'm selling the material. So if you live on the other side of the bridge and I'm selling you one column in, you don't want it, go out to a Demco, spend a half a day going both ways. And I did very well with that. And then I was thinking of selling the alarm company and just doing distribution. And the powers that be at a Demco said, don't take a chance like that. You never know when they're going to cut you off. Because some of the things that happened in the industry, this was in all manufacturers, they would give credit to a distributor, and then they would say, look, our books are ending, you got to pay everything down to zero, get a bank loan, and after that we'll give you double the credit. The guys did it, and then after it was done, they didn't give them any credit, they dropped them. So a lot of guys got hurt real bad by these big companies.
Wow.
They used them up like toilet paper, you throw it away, you don't reuse it. And that's all these distributors were that got the short end of the stick. They were nothing more than a roll of toilet paper.
Over the years, can you share some stories that were somewhat crazy, bizarre, funny?
Yes. Let me see. So I was I did a job for Nathan Levin. He was the leading economist for the country. And he was the chairman of the board of UN Plaza. It was a condo association. And at that time, President Kennedy wasn't president. He lived in the building. So did Truman Capote. So my daughter was 2 years old. She's now 55. He invited me up to the house. And after we had brunch on Sunday, he took me to a cottage he had on the property. And he showed me the Korean economy that he set up and where it would be 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. And
North Korea or South Korea?
South Korea. And it was very impressive how he could track if they sold X number of dollars this year, what it would be going all around. And then he said, listen, you have to learn to run a business. You may think installing and you're worth $10, $15 an hour, which was a lot of money in the 60s. He said, but you can't go by that. You're worth $10, $15 an hour to replace you. Go out and sell a job that day and make $1,000 profit. That's how you're going to build the business. You got to get away from this. You got to trust people. You got to teach them, and you got to really learn. You know, you can't just go around and ride on luck. He says, because now you've only been luck. You know, as far as doing a nice job, talking nice to people, this, that, and the other. So I had a lot of people that gave me some very tough lessons of love and kicked me real hard, and I remembered it quite well.
I think we always all remember that. You know, that's why it's so important to pay it forward.
You have to, but it's very hard to make change.
Yeah, it really is. One of the core items that you come into is you talk about is training, investing, right?
Yes.
Training in people. Can you talk a little about that? I know we talk about it, but give me some detail.
I would do on-the-job training. I would drill a hole down the window going down to the basement. I show them how I curve the 4-foot bit and break out, and then I put the wire through the hook. I pull it down. So you see how easy that is? I said, you do it. I pull the wire out, pull the bit out, and I let them do it.
So on-the-job training.
Yeah, they'd be there forever. Then I'd show them, you know, how to feel your way. I bought the 280 copper wire that Demko sold, and I'd stick that in the hole from downstairs, not using the bit. So I could have made 2 holes. I'd stick it in. I'd go in with a snake. I'd swish it around. Sometimes I'd use a continuity tester that I'd make with a buzzer, and I would clip onto the copper wire from downstairs, bring it upstairs, and I'd clip on to my snake, twist it around. I'd hear it buzz, twist it. If it's pulling up and it's still buzzing, I know I had it. So there were simple things like that that I taught them. But most people, if you're going to teach them something and they don't have common sense, you don't have a very good chance of having success. So a person's got to have common sense, and he's got to be aggressive. If he's looking at pictures on the wall, he's looking in the corner there, instead of watching you drill the hole, he's not for me. So,
right, so you're somewhat aggressive in a good sense, right? You've got to take initiative. You've got to take care of the customer. You've got a 3 or 4 second window to make that first impression.
That's it.
Right.
I went to see the vice president of GE. Was recommended to me. I went in my work clothes. I was dirty. I was crawling out of an attic. I met him at 7:30, and he opens the door. He's in a tuxedo and a bow tie, and he looks at me, goes, so I went like that. I said, what'd you expect, a guy in a tuxedo? So he laughed and all of that. He says, how long is it going to take for you to give me a price? I says, I can do it already. You got a Mercedes, you're wearing a Rolex watch. I says, I'm going to do the job and send you the bill. You don't need to know how much it is. So
so read the customer.
So that was it, and we became friends, and they recommended me a lot of people. And Jack Welch is, I can't say, but I did work for all the wealthy people, all the CEOs of the banks. I'm not going to mention names. The CEOs of big alarm companies that are national. So that's as far as I could go. I can't talk about people like Ron Howard or Philip Niarchos, who after the Second World War, he bought up all the oil tankers, all the shipping ships. And his sister was Christine, that was married to Onassis. Onassis divorced her, married Kennedy. Niarchos had $1, Onassis had a penny. That was the difference in wealth. So I was friendly with him. We took care of his security for 25 years. I took care of the art collection. He'd send paintings, $200 million, send it out to France, to the museum. And that's what I did. I always did high end. When I worked for the Holmes Company, I worked in David Rockefeller's house. He died a few years ago. He was 102. And I was so excited to go to his house. I go in there. The paint's peeling, the carpet's ripped. He's renting out the top floor for $80 a month. I said, oh my goodness, what's going on here? You know, the Nixon's Law Partners, the Ballantines. And those were the jobs I did when I was with the Holmes Company.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I did all high-end stuff. So it was a good experience for me.
John, questions?
Well, you know, looking back, are there some things that you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Absolutely. I would have learned about sales. I would have hired salespeople right from the beginning. And I thought they were worthless, but now I know that they're the heart of the success of a company, because they're pumping the blood through the rest of the parts that make the machine work. And without salespeople, you have nothing. How are people going to get to you? Who's going to write it up? Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to call the customer afterwards? Mr. Jones, are you very happy with anything? Would you like me to come over and show you how to operate it again and do this and do that? That's what people want to hear.
Yeah, especially what they want to hear, you have to provide. You have to do it. What about the future from here now? Where do you see it?
I think as things become easier to do, and when you look at Ring, or when you look at that Simply Safe and all of that, the people don't stay with them that long. I mean, I never did a free installation. I may have done a couple, say in my lifetime. If I did 100, it was a lot. But people have no respect for it. They don't want it. They don't pay. They're usually not creditworthy. Somebody pays $50,000, $100,000 to have their house wired up. That's a lifetime commitment. You can't. How do you explain the difference? A free installation for $50 a month, $100,000 job with a service contract for $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And what formulas do the other companies use? And I charge a little bit less, but my service is 10 times better.
Mm-hmm.
You call me 2 a.m, we go out.
So the DIY has not been a threat to you?
No threat at all. Some of the cable companies, they don't report it anymore. You go to Barnes Buchanan, you listen to their speech, and you can see it. Do you go to the last one?
No.
You?
Not anymore.
Yes.
I go.
Yeah.
Where would you, you mentioned Barnes Buchanan, you mentioned some of the Alarm Association meetings. What would you stay active in to get the pulse of the industry? Whether it be technology, whether it be sales, whether it be finance, where would you go?
I talk to everybody. I mean, like today, I called up a guy I haven't spoken to for, I'm going to say 6 years. I just called him up. We spoke for 45 minutes. He does building management. He did Hudson Yards, Javits Center and all of that. He has offers on very low dollar volume for the year, but because the potential's there's some heavyweight people that are willing to give him $100 million for that. So I was really impressed with that, how that industry is going this way. And the alarm industry, you look at the charts, whether it's Barnes Buchanan or whatever it is, and then you take the smaller companies, which they make up, 40 or 60% of the installations being done. And at one time, I wanted to start a manufacturing company and only sell to the smaller companies, have them overpay on the panels, and there would be advertising based upon how much sales were in those particular zip codes. We would spend that portion of the money advertising. So if you didn't buy enough stuff from your own interest in the manufacturing company, you weren't going to get the advertising unless we went national on a radio show or TV. And that's how you have to promote it.
One of the mechanisms that a lot of people talk about are the acquisition strategy.
It's the only way to have growth.
So can you give me your perspective of that, of how to look for a company, how to do due diligence, how do you normalize it? And have you done so? Obviously you have done so.
Always small deals. A couple of 100 accounts here, 400 accounts there. And one of the first ones I did was when I first started out. It was just at the time that I bought the phone building, and Mike Backer became my partner. And there was a police chief and a lieutenant. They owned an alarm company. When the guy became police chief, he had to get rid of the alarm company. So the lieutenant took it over. And the lieutenant, I always went out and fixed things for him, no charge, and sold him material and took good care of him. He says, when I retire, I'm going to sell you my business. I said, okay. So I says, how are we going to do it? He says, all you got to do is write up a letter that I'm retiring, you're taking over for me, and I'll put down that Jim, are retiring, and Don's my friend, and I put down I'm Don, I'm taking over, Jim's my friend. And they say, okay, we'll make the deal. So, nothing happens. Pulls up one day, he's got a trailer with his boat, he brings in 2 file cabinets, he puts it down, He says, mail out the letters, the business is yours, here's the phone number. So I says, what do you want for it? He says, don't worry about that. He says, I only ask one thing. When you find stuff that wasn't right, fix it and bill me. He says, I'm gonna fix it, I'm not gonna bill you. He had all the school systems, he had everything Rolls Royce in a very expensive area. I don't hear from the guy for a year and a half. I'm sitting in the office with Mike, and Mike says, there's a guy at the door. He wants to see you guys, and he's got a gun. And it's on the side. Mike Becker runs out and he hides. He comes in, we have a great time talking, we're laughing. And I said, what do you want for it? At that time, I still didn't know what it was worth. It was definitely worth $300,000. All he wanted was $18,000, and I paid him $1,500 a month for the year. And that's how I got one of the biggest acquisitions I did.
Boy, what a deal.
We had a garage door guy. He was putting in the Ladia things with the little box and real crap. He was in Scarsdale. He says, whatever you do, don't rat me out, fix it, I'll pay us. I'm not gonna do anything. I said, all I need you to do is give me credit. I'll pay you the $10,000, $1,000 a month for 10 months. He says, what kind of references do you have? I said, well, I got the other guy that does the automatic doors, Bert. Bert's gonna give you a recommendation? He does that, it's all yours. He calls up Bert. Hey, this guy said he knows you, you're gonna give him a recommendation. He said, absolutely. They hung up the phone, he says, it's yours. We wrote up the paper and I got that deal. And I continually got deals like that. And when I was in the distribution, a lot of electricians that bought from me, they had big high-end clients. They would give me all the jobs and they wouldn't even take commission. I got that Philip Nyarko's job from electrician. He was going through a divorce and he was owed $10,000. I said, give me the bill. I'll get you the $10,000. No, my wife will get half. I'm not taking the money. And that was it. He just let the money go down the sewer.
Huh.
So I did very well with all the electrical supply houses. They all knew me and I took care of them. And I was very lucky that I got in with all of DEA, FBI, TARU, Secret Service, any organization that was government came to me. So that gave me a big edge.
And if we can drill down a bit on, we were talking about, you said acquisition is really the strategy to grow.
There's no other way.
So
When you take any company, I'm not going to mention names, every single company, I don't care who it is, whether you're going to go to North Carolina, the big guy, or you're going to go nationally to the big guy. It takes 3 weeks of installations to replace what you lose. So if Seritage bought Stanley and bought a lot of these other guys, that's tremendous growth.
Mhm.
And that's all they were able to finance. And when you finance $1 million at 5%, it's $50,000 a year. And if that $1 million brings in $30,000 a month, and you only got to pay the 5%, which is $50,000 for the year, you got $25,000 a month left over to work with, and that's the only way you can have growth.
the problem that I see is it's easy to buy. It's the due diligence. A lot of people don't know the different steps that are required to make a deal and to normalize it. And some people, you're right, they can write a check. But then how do you make these customers happy customers?
You got to have the manpower that's going to go out, straighten out the job, not bill the people, get them to sign a longer contract, and you must give good service. If you're not giving good service, you're out of the loop. Can't work.
So that's what it comes down to.
That's
So
it. There is
we
nothing
keep
else.
focusing on good
Nothing
service.
else.
John, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was just thinking about ones that I went through, and the big thing was also don't forget to change the decals and the signs when you're out there. We went through some big
Nobody ever
exercises.
does that.
Yeah, and I realized
Now
that.
you're trying to embarrass me. Can I stick my head under the table till I feel better?
Well, we did what was called a resale blitz, and we'd go into a city and just places that, former accounts, we'd use the customer lists and walk in and see what's a new business that's in there. Would you like to continue that? Otherwise, we have to take your system out. And we ended up signing up quite a few people that way, and we changed the decals. And this was in San Francisco.
So you were leasing at the time?
Yeah, they
Good
were
for you.
all these systems.
Yeah, smart.
That was back in our National Guardian days, because
Yeah.
we bought so many small companies in about a 11-year period. So, well,
time's really,
yeah, this
yeah,
is amazing, and
it really is. And 83, right? You're 83?
I'll be 82 next week.
82. And you're
And
still,
I
you're
only
still
accept
active.
cash because I don't want to gain weight.
yeah.
And you're still active.
Oh, yeah. 6 months a year I like to work, and I've always taken off 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So do you actually work 5 days a week?
Oh, no. 2-3 hours a
2-3
day.
hours a day.
I got to play racquetball. I got to play tree cushion billiards. I travel all over the country. I played racquetball in Ireland. I've played billiards in Korea, Amsterdam, Belgium. I go all over. When I was out for the show in Vegas, the security show, it ended on Friday. And then that Friday at the Rio Hotel started the world class tree cushion billiard tournament. And 500 pool tables were set up for the 8-ball, 9-ball. You got 6,000 people that were out there to compete.
Wow.
So,
Any final thoughts?
yes, if I was to start again, I think I would have been a lot wiser. That's all I could say, and I think everybody says that.
And how would you be wiser?
I would have spent the time to take the classes to learn about developing a business and what the strategies were. You know, I was 17, I go in the Marine Corps, I get out. I worked in B. Waltman and Company as an electrician at the department store. Then I worked for the Holmes Company. And then right after that, I started out on my own. So I never took the time to learn anything.
Yeah, well, you learned, you did well. And obviously on-the-job training, right? You learned as you needed.
Absolutely. The one experience I remember, it was 1968. I had 2 people working for me. One was a cousin and one was a friend. They got paid $25 a day in those days. That was $125 a week. I made $5,000 one week for myself, and I thought I'd go to jail, and I cheated the people and I made too much money. And I just couldn't understand how I'd be entitled to make that kind of money. But I learned pretty quick. It didn't last long. I got to understand that it was okay.
Well, that's great. Any questions that we can answer for you?
No, I think I
So
covered
really,
everything.
really appreciate it. A lot to learn. Great words of wisdom. And John, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to thank you very much, Don, for
My pleasure.
Yeah,
coming
Don,
here. Really
thank you so
appreciate it.
much.